In this tank guide, we're going over the best Battlefield 6 tank loadouts for both the main battle tank and the Infantry Fighting Vehicle. We'll go over all the ammo types and shells, equipment, and each upgrade, and we'll recommend which ones you should be using in your loadouts to best optimize your tank battles. Now, some of the things you select are going to come down to preference. So depending on your playstyle, if you're more of an aggressive tank player, or maybe you'd like to move in and out of battle, ultimately your top loadout will be the one that you play best with. Quick tip, before we jump into ammo types, I saw some confusion on how to equip your secondary ammo on the main battle tank. This info can be found at the bottom right of your screen, right above your ammo count. You'll see the action needed to change your ammo type. For me, this is number 2, and for controller, it should be right on the D-pad. You can also change this in your keybinds and controller settings. You'll also quickly notice that the ammo naming conventions are different depending if you're in chase view or zoomed in. So just keep that in mind when you build your loadouts and then actually jump in game. Starting with the MBT. We'll first look at all the ammo types. The first shell you start off with is the multi-purpose shell. This is a high explosive shell, moderately effective against both infantry and armored vehicles. So basically, like the name implies, this is your all-around ammo type. It's good for most situations, but not really great at anything. Now with that said, I'm actually a fan of this ammo type, now that I've played around with all the other ammo types available. I think it definitely has a place in one of your loadouts, which I'll explain when we get to the actual loadout section. The next shell is the armor piercing round, a shell designed to target heavy armor and less effective against infantry due to the absence of an explosive charge. So this shell, in my opinion, should be in every loadout. As a battle tank, one of your main jobs is to seek out and destroy or defend against enemy armor. The two biggest downsides to this shell are obviously, like the description reads, this is not an anti-infantry shell. Because of its lack of explosive damage, the only way you can get an infantry kill is with a direct hit. But even then, it's literally hit or miss. Also, you'll find that because of the lack of explosive damage, this thing really doesn't do anything against the environment. So trying to break down buildings and structures is better suited with some explosive type rounds. This is why I do think the multi-purpose round does have value. Now, where the AP round lacks in killing infantry, it makes up for it in the way of higher damage to armored vehicles. From what I can tell, it's around a 10% increase in damage from the MP rounds. Which may not seem that significant, but that 10% can literally be the difference between killing the other tank in one less shot. The AP shell is definitely the go-to when battling enemy tanks. The next two rounds, the anti-personal shell and the high explosive shell, are both ammo types targeted specifically to be used against infantry. The anti-personal shell is basically like a shotgun round. It's got a short range, and it really does nothing against armored vehicles. The high explosive round is similar to the multi-purpose round in that it also has explosive damage, but trades a larger explosive area for a decrease in damage to armor. Through my testing, it's actually a pretty significant hit, and it seems like the shells do about 20% less damage to armor. And last, we have the aim-guided shell, which reads, an effective anti-vehicle shell that can be guided to the target via the weapon's crosshairs, capable of locking onto targets that have been marked with a laser designator or tracer dart. The aim-guided munition can be devastating in the right hands, and its ability to be used against aerial targets makes this one of the most useful ammo types. It sits right between the AP and MP shells in terms of damage, but it does come with the downside of losing its laser-guided ability when enemies use anti-lock on equipment. So out of the 5 main ammo types for the MBT, the 3 that I would recommend to use are the MP round, the AP round, and the aim-guided shell. There's just not enough use case for me to recommend the anti-personal or high explosive rounds. The MBT already comes with a built-in anti-infantry weapon in each of its machine gun variants. So using up one of the heavy shell slots to load an anti-infantry munition seems to hamper the MBT's main function of battling other heavy armor. Ranking the top 3, I would put the armor-piercing rounds in first. The extra damage that these shells provide alone is reason to keep these in your loadout. In second, I would put the aim-guided shell with its ability to not only target land vehicles, but also helis and planes. And then the MP rounds for their versatility. Moving on to the secondary machine guns. We have the light machine gun, a gun ideal for combating infantry at medium range, but less effective against lightly armored vehicles. Then we have the heavy machine gun, which is ideal for combating unarmored vehicles and infantry at long range. The biggest difference between the two is going to be range, accuracy, and forgiveness. The LMG is going to be way more forgiving as it has a faster fire rate, but hitting targets further out will require more precise controlled fire, while the HMG is going to fare much better with its harder hitting, slower rate of fire. Up close, the HMG can also be difficult to land shots on moving infantry, where the LMG can shine in clearing out soldiers in the close vicinity. The MBT has a choice of one of 3 specialized equipment defenses. Thermal blocking smoke, which comes standard, discharges a cloud of thermal smoke that obscures the vehicle, disrupts the guidance systems of incoming lock-on missiles, blocks the ability to spot targets, and clear spotted markers from all infantry inside the radius. This is probably the most powerful defense mechanism you have as a tank. The ability to not only obscure yourself, but also disrupt the locking system makes this one of, if not the best choice for this slot. One thing to keep in mind when using this, though, is the thermal smoke not only hides you, but also any nearby enemies, making you an easier target for sneaky infantry to come in for a sneak attack. Make sure to reposition when you pop smoke. The Projectile Intercept system intercepts and destroys enemy missiles, shells, rockets, grenades, and bombs. It intercepts all projectiles during a window of activation that begins after the initial detection. Basically, it's invincibility for your tank. Which sounds OP, but in reality, the window is super short and really only useful against one attack. This is really for the sweat tank operators. Instead of hiding behind smoke, you can use this to push the action. And last, we have emergency repair, which repairs damaged vehicles but can only be activated when the vehicle has low health. This would be a great defensive mechanism, but the fact that this is only able to be activated when at low health makes it less valuable. And it usually makes more sense to choose thermal smoke over this. It seems like this has a very specific use case, and that would be when your tank becomes disabled, like when running over a mine. Then you can activate this and you would instantly get your tank running again. But I would still take thermal blocking over this, which would be my number 1 choice for this slot, followed by Projectile Intercept, then Emergency Repair. And for the tank upgrade section, we have Field Maintenance, which enables faster vehicle health recovery after taking damage and will also gain ammo sooner and faster. This is a pretty valuable perk, especially if you're constantly moving in and out of action. Getting your tank to recover faster will allow you to get back into the fight sooner. Reinforced plating gives you additional armor that improves resistance to all damage, but reduces max speed and acceleration. The additional armor you receive here is pretty substantial. I was seeing more than a 15% increase in armor with this equipped. And yes, the negative speed and deceleration are a big downside, but this is where proper movement and awareness will help you overcome these negatives. Enhanced loading increases primary weapon fire rate and improves secondary weapon heat recovery. The system deactivates when vehicle health is reduced. This is basically your DPS boost upgrade. Faster rate of fire equals higher damage output. On paper, this is a no-brainer. but the deactivation when vehicle health is reduced makes this pretty much unusable. I only see this viable if you shoot range shells from the other side of the map. Not really my playstyle, but if that's you, we don't judge. Or will we? Optimized handling is going to do just that. Improve your turning rate and aiming speed. Don't really see the reason for picking this over the others. Even if this was like a 200% increase, you're still limited by your rate of fire. So ranking these, I put reinforced plating as number 1, followed by field maintenance in second. The gunner seat also has a separate loadout that is just as important as your main loadout. The gunner has the same options for machine guns and can choose between an LMG or an HMG. They do, however, have a third option, which is the grenade launcher. This can be a very powerful anti-infantry weapon. Unfortunately, not a lot of people know how to use it correctly. Most new players try to hit directly onto the target, when in reality, the best way to utilize the grenade launcher is to shoot the ground around the enemy. This, coupled with the grenade launcher's arcing pattern, can be frustrating for newer players. The gunner also has an equipment slot that can either house the smoke wall, which fires multiple smoke projectiles that detonate to form a smoke wall that obscures the vehicle. It also blocks the ability to spot targets and clear spotted markers from all infantry inside the radius. This is very similar to the thermal smoke that the main driver has, but instead, the smoke projectiles are fired away from the tank versus surrounding the tank. They also have the Countermeasures ability, which detects mines and C4 explosives. When detected, the gunner can activate Countermeasures and destroy the enemy equipment. This is a no-brainer for most tank loadouts, as the number of mines you run into far outweighs the need for smoke. So how would our loadouts look? The nice thing is, they give us 3 savable loadouts. So even if you're in between a couple of these categories, you can always just make a second or even third loadout. I usually make my first loadout the all-purpose loadout. This is the loadout that I can default to without having to think about my team makeup. Things like, are there enough engineers on the team? Is the other team using anti-tank mines, etc. It covers most of my bases and can do well on most maps. The only thing that this loadout is really vulnerable to are aerial attacks. So for our primary shell, we are actually going with the multi-purpose round. The reason I equip this in my primary slot is it's best to drive around with a shell loaded versus using your machine gun. If you drive around with your machine gun locked in first, when you switch to your heavy shell ammo, it takes a few seconds for the ammo to load. Those are precious seconds you're going to waste going from machine gun to heavy shell. By having a MP shell already loaded, you are ready to take on enemy armor, infantry, or even take down buildings if need be. For the secondary slot, this is where we house the armor-piercing rounds. So for a typical tank versus tank battle, the goal would be to get the first shot off with the MP shell, then quickly switch to the AP shell to have that loaded in as your next shot. By getting the first shot off and quickly loading to a more powerful armor-piercing round, you should have the advantage over most enemy tanks. For the machine gun, I take the HMG for its accuracy over range. The LMG is also a great option here, but I actually take the HMG for a very specific reason that has to do with the gunner loadout that I'll get to here in just a moment. For equipment, I take thermal blocking as the defensive equivalent to an all-purpose gadget. It can be used to get you out of most sticky situations. For the upgrade, I take reinforced plating. This has proven for me to be most useful, as the extra armor can help you stay in the fight longer and also help you escape from fights that normally would have taken you out had you had less armor. Now for the gunner, we try to keep it simple. This loadout is optimized for pub lobbies. So no matter who jumps into the gunner seat, they can be an asset to your tank team. Because we took the HMG for our main gun, we can then equip the gunner with the LMG. In practice, this should cover you at range as well as in close quarters. The LMG is also a much easier gun to use. Also a reason we don't select the grenade launcher here, as we are trying to make a loadout that can easily be used by any skill level player. In the equipment slot, we take the mine countermeasures. This really is the only option here, as the ability to detect mines is invaluable on all maps and situations. Even if your gunner doesn't know how to activate it properly to destroy the mines, you will still be able to go around and shoot them yourself. Also, the smoke wall option can be quite annoying if your gunner is popping smoke at inopportune times. For Loadout 2, this is more of a team play loadout. When you know who your gunner will be, or if you have comms with your other teammates. This loadout is based on having the ability to coordinate attacks with multiple people. For our primary, we are going to go with the aim guided missile. This will act as your multi-purpose shell, but will also have the ability to lock on to painted targets, even those pesky jets and helis. For our secondary, we are going with the powerful AP rounds. For our machine gun, this will really be dependent on your gunner. If your gunner is great with the grenade launcher or LMG, I would go with the HMG here. If not, just go with the LMG. For the equipment slot, this is where it can get interesting. With a well-communicated team, we can choose the Projectile Intercept. And yes, that would mean we would have to forgo the thermal smoke. But again, if you have a seasoned gunner on board, you can give them the smoke ability. I still take reinforced plating here, as extra armor is always good. And then for the gunner, depending on their preference, we can give them the option that they are strongest with. For example, I'm taking the HMG here. Since we picked the Projectile Intercept earlier, we can now go with Smoke Wall. So now you have an invincibility skill as well as a smoke screen at your disposal. Loadout 3 I have set up for testing purposes, but you can add a third loadout for any specialized setups you can think of. For the IFV, there are a few different options for primary ammo. The standard high explosive shell is designed to combat infantry and non-armored vehicles, less effective against armored targets. This is one of my favorite weapons in the game. At first, it can be finicky. It has a slight drop off at range, and its explosive radius isn't as large as you would hope. It also isn't a high velocity shell, so you do have to lead a moving target a little bit at range. But once you get this down, you can have some monster games. The anti-personnel shell is designed to target infantry at short to medium ranges, also ineffective against armor. This is a canister round just like the shell the MBT can equip. I really don't feel like it's worth the primary slot here. Maybe they'll buff it in the future update and will actually be usable. Last, we have the armor piercing shell. A shell designed to target heavy armor, less effective against infantry due to the absence of an explosive charge. The AP shell for the IFV is very different than the main battle tank AP shell. The IFV shell is a smaller caliber and does significantly less damage, so it's better compared to the high explosive shell on the IFV. For the secondary weapon, we have the aim guided missile, which is an effective anti-vehicle missile that can be guided to the target via the weapon crosshairs, capable of locking onto targets that have been marked with the laser designator or tracer dart. This is your multi-purpose missile that is pretty good against most things. However, if you can master the flight of the missile, it can be pretty useful for tracking targets manually, and even hitting targets behind cover. In the right hands, you can even take out enemy aircraft. The lock-guided missile does require lock-on before launch, after which the missile will guide itself to the target unless intercepted by countermeasures. It's capable of faster and longer range lock-ons for targets that have been marked with the laser designator or tracer dart. So the lock-guided missile might very well be the most powerful anti-armor shell in the game. It does more damage than the MBT's armor-piercing shell and is capable of one-shotting IFVs and MBTs if the missile hits the tank's weak spot. It's also a one-shot down for all aircraft. The biggest downside, of course, to the MR missile is that 1. It has to lock on to its target, and 2. It's easily nullified by countermeasures. The light rockets are multi-purpose unguided rockets effective against almost all targets. These rockets are okay in practice. They can effectively neutralize infantry and deal an okay amount of damage to armor, but they really are outmatched compared to the guided missile options. In the equipment slot, the IFV shares 2 options with the MBT. Thermal blocking and emergency repair work the same way as the main battle tanks, but the IFV gets another different option with its smoke generator, which emits smoke continuously to obscure the vehicle. It can be laid down while driving to create a smoke wall, block stability to spot targets, and clear spotted markers from all infantry inside the smoke radius. The smoke generator is pretty cool in that you can essentially create a wall of smoke from behind you. When activated, the smoke emits from the rear of the tank and follows you as you drive off. I would probably still take the thermal smoke as the number 1 option here, but this would come in as a close second, with emergency repair being third. Although emergency repair is a little more useful on the IFV because of its lighter armor, the IFV does tend to get into those low health situations more often, but because it has better mobility, it can easily maneuver out of tougher situations, and having the emergency repair option is a little more viable for the IFV. For equipment slot 2, the IFV has a proximity threat detector, which detects nearby enemy soldiers and vehicles and shows them on the minimap for a short duration. Basically a UAV that lasts for a few seconds, and it's pretty useful for seeing the threats around you. Or you can equip the counter fire radar, which, when activated, spots the source of incoming damage, marking their position in-world and on the minimap. Unlike the proximity detector, this works only when being fired upon. This radar seems like a great idea, as it's really difficult sometimes to spot where you're getting hit from, but usually, by the time you're able to use the counterfire radar, it's already too late. For IFV upgrades, we once again have field maintenance for faster recovery and reinforced plating for that additional armor. We also have the option of a targeting jammer, which slows the enemy's ability to acquire lock-on, clears the vehicle spotted marker sooner, and reduces its heat signature in thermal imaging. This is a nice to have upgrade in those lobbies where you feel like you're constantly getting locked onto. But you're not always going to get into those lobbies, so it's not my first choice. The systems upgrade allows faster cooldowns on equipment in slot 1 and increases range and duration on equipment slot 2. This is a useful upgrade for those who like to push with the IFV. For instance, if you have the emergency repair and threat detection equipment upgrades on, you can have a longer and wider UAV up and also be able to hit your emergency repair more often during battles. Alright, so looking at our IFV loadouts. For loadout 1, again we are making this the all-around loadout. So we're going to take the high explosive shells as our primary. This thing really just wrecks infantry. And then we're going to go with the aim-guided rocket for that versatility. Thermal blocking for equipment slot 1, and threat detector for slot 2. We're going with the reinforced plating upgrade for the extra armor, and a light machine gun for our gunner. For loadout 2, we're going to make this build more focused on taking down enemy armor and tanks. So for primary ammo, we're going to take the armor-piercing shells, and for the secondary ammo, we're going to go with the lock-guided missile for that insane damage and one-shot kill potential. For equipment slot 1, we are going to take emergency repair to get us in and out of battle quicker. And for equipment slot 2, we're taking threat detector. And we're going to go with the systems upgrade to get our emergency repair up quicker and our radar lasting longer with more coverage. And lastly, we're going to equip the heavy machine gun for our more experienced gunner. So that's going to wrap up our Battlefield 6 Best Tank Loadouts Guide. If you guys haven't already seen, go check out some of my other tank videos. I've found some pretty interesting information regarding tank damage. If this helped you out, don't forget to drop that like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the battlefield.